Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to do a quick video kind of giving a general overview of XRP. We're seeing a couple pretty interesting things on the chart, as well as I have seen several people in my comment section mention XRP before, and so I wanted to kind of do just a kind of a quick general overview of kind of some of my initial thoughts to XRP. Obviously, I'm not super familiar with XRP. I bought it probably in like 2017 or whatever, a couple of bull runs ago, and people were all jazzed about it. So, I obviously have a little bit of experience with it, but I haven't done too much like really heavy in-depth research. And so this is kind of what I wanted to kind of view as like a starting point. And then obviously anybody who has feedback of things that, maybe I potentially missed or got wrong or whatever, I'd love to hear those in the comment section below. And then I can have future videos that discuss that a little bit further. But so starting out, I wanted to go over a couple things looking at XRP specifically. And so the first thing I wanted to show was, obviously this is just from Ripple's website, but what we can see is they actually have shown, 2.8 billion transactions representing over $1 trillion in value moved between counterparties since 2012, which that seems pretty decent overall, right? Pretty good. In terms of like volume, just kind of in a vacuum. However, one thing that I have heard very, very repeatedly from the XRP community and kind of people who are kind of the XRP Ultra Bulls is that like XRP is going to replace Swift, right? And Swift is kind of interesting because if that is the goal, we need to compare that to, okay, well, what has Swift done, right? Now, looking here at a quick Google search, we can see that Swift actually does $150 trillion annually, right? So looking at XRP, obviously, a trillion is definitely no small value, but, a trillion in 12 years versus 150 trillion annually, that's definitely quite the difference, right? So there obviously is a usage or an adoption curve that is kind of yet to play out. I think this is kind of the base case, I would say, for like the XRP bulls, which is like, if it replaces Swift and takes over the transaction volume of Swift, like this is multi 100x's of like increase in transaction volume on the Swift chain, right? And yes, I think that makes sense. Overall, I think that's something that is something to consider for sure. However, one thing that I have heard and seen in my research is XRP is kind of weird, right? Because generally in most crypto coins that you happen to get into, there's I would say ample ways for like value accrual and making more money, right? The biggest way is usually staking. You get some sort of like reward in terms of like transaction fees or helping like automated market makers, or sometimes it's deflationary. Sometimes, if like in the case of Bitcoin, you can go buy a miner and you can get paid out in transaction fees and block rewards and all this type of stuff. But essentially, long story short, there's a lot of ways for value accrual to impact the coin, right? And that's really kind of the key here. And the thing that I've noticed in XRP is that there's not really a huge place for that to happen, right? So obviously, there's a very, very tiny fraction of a percent that is burned every time an XRP payment is sent. So in a sense, it is technically deflationary. And maybe if we do see Swift level volumes, then maybe that deflation becomes meaningful. But at least currently, like I would not call it meaningful at all. But other than that, like there's no real way to earn XRP, right? Like even the like ledger, like the node providers on the XRP network, like they don't even get paid out in XRP for validating the network, which seems kind of interesting. I'm going to have to do a little bit more like research into that because I don't really understand like what the incentive is to like provide coverage for the XRP network. That's kind of something that's a little bit confusing to me. But ultimately, like there's no automated market makers. There's nothing like that. What we can see with this next article here, this was actually in January of 2024, so relatively recently. But David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple, basically said that there could be a way they have this like automated market maker feature upcoming actually, and then people with XRP could essentially stake that XRP and essentially earn the yield on like the fees generated. So this is something that could potentially address that problem. But currently, I think the biggest issue that I'm seeing with XRP is how does this value accrual both one happen and two kind of like flywheel itself, right? Because a lot of these cryptos that do really, really well, they kind of have a value accrual flywheel that just kind of it like continues to feed on itself and grow and grow and grow. And so that's something that, at least currently, is like my biggest reservation that I've seen to XRP. That's not to say that, it can't moon and it can't do crazy numbers and all this type of stuff. I do think if it were to in fact replace Swift, then potentially it becomes deflationary enough in a meaningful way that could happen. But ultimately, like right now, it seems like a very, very long game. And what we can see actually though on the chart is something relatively interesting. Now I'm showing these on week-long candles, and what we can see is this is like a multi-year long wedge that is forming, which is really, really interesting because we've seen a very, very dramatic consolidation kind of between this like 74 cents and like 46 cents range that's happened realistically ever since like March of 2023. It's been pretty stable within this range ever since then. Again, kind of putting in like maybe almost lower highs and kind of higher lows. It's not definitely not like a perfect wedge. If we look at it over a long enough period of time, it is, but like this is something where, and again, I think this is something that maybe the XRP bulls point to, because if we were to break out of this, particularly to the upside, we could maybe be looking at $5.50 potentially. Not bad. I hear some calls for $98, $100. I have my reservations. I think the only way we get to that type of valuation, particularly, is through a massive like deflationary event. And I'm not really sure. I guess I could go do the math on it, but like I'm not really sure. Like that seems like you need a ridiculous amount of volume to get a deflationary event that kind of does that type of like price appreciation. Maybe if they did some sort of automated market maker and the yield from that potentially goes through and that starts generating a ton of like revenue, maybe that's something that could potentially work out. There's a lot of different variables here, but ultimately I would say just XRP in its current state doesn't really appear to be something that has massive fundamental appreciation ability. Now that's not to say that it can't happen, right? But seeing something like this, I think this would have to be driven more on hype, potentially news. There's nothing really here fundamentally that I think is really going to push this, because how do people like, okay, let's say I buy XRP at $5.50, right? Why? I think that's kind of ultimately the question here, particularly now, like with cross-border transactions and interbank transactions, things like this. CBDCs are on the horizon. A lot of banks have kind of, governments specifically, have pointed to this for a while. You have USDC, you have USDT. If you wanted to exchange cross-border, just use those, right? So I think like in 2012, obviously this idea was very novel and quite revolutionary. But in today's market, I think there's been a lot of point solutions that could potentially solve this, equivalent or maybe even better than XRP. And so this is something that, again, remains a concern. If they find a better way to like monetize the coin and kind of have that like sticky value accrual, then I do think that there's a lot of potential here. Again, from like a pure like technical analysis perspective, this type of wedge is something that like looks pretty good overall, right? I mean, even if we don't see, the $5 range, but up in here we're at 150, back here we're at like $3. So I mean, there definitely is some opportunity here. As you can see, I have been doing a lot of my trading and charting on Margex recently, just because Margex is a really nice leverage exchange where you can kind of take advantage of some of these smaller moves in the market. It is quite nice because, some of these smaller moves can be really meaningful in terms of return, just because you are using leverage trading. And so if this is something that you're interested in, feel free to check the link in my description below. As I say every single time, leverage trading is definitely very risky, and it's not for the faint of heart. I mainly mean that like you need to know what you're doing, right? There is several ways where you can make a lot of money very easily, but there's also, I would say, several or more ways that you could lose a lot of money. So if you are interested, just make sure you're being careful, make sure you're being responsible, and just make sure you know what you're doing before you get into it. So ultimately, that's kind of what I wanted to go over today, discussing XRP. I know, I had a little bit of, concern and confusion regarding the coin and kind of where it stands. Again, this is not to say that it can't appreciate in price, right? Like, coins do a lot of crazy things in the market, and particularly if we have some news, I would say mainly within volume growth on like cross-border transactions, onboarding more institutions, a lot of that type of stuff. That to me is kind of where I think Ripple could could really see some explosive growth. But other than that, just from like pure fundamental analysis, like value investing type of perspective, I'm not really sure how that value kind of sticks around. So that's kind of the only concern that I wanted to bring up. And again, I am by no means an XRP expert. And so if any of you are super into XRP, I'd really love to hear your comments. Maybe there's something that I'm missing. Maybe there's some sort of like value play or price appreciation or something that I'm missing other than, I would say maybe the more obvious like deflation route. I would love to hear. So if you have anything like that, please do leave it in the comment section below. Otherwise, if you have anything else, questions, concerns, feedback, I'd love to hear it. I do appreciate all of your guys' insights and feedback. It really is quite helpful. Also, if you did find this video helpful or useful, please do give me a like and subscribe. It really, really does help me out. I am trying to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And so with your support, I think that'd be really helpful. So anyway, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.